This is Your Legal Rights. I'm Chuck Finney. Our topic is estate planning, focusing on the prevention of and how to protect elders from elder financial abuse. My guests are Linda Kramer and Deborah Radin, specialists in estate planning, trust, and probate law of the Kramer-Radin Law Office in Los Altos, and John Martin, specialist in estate planning, trust, and probate law with Law Office in Menlo Park. My guests are certified by the California Board of Legal Specialization of the State Bar. Funding for this segment of Your Legal Rights is made possible by the California Board of Legal Specialization of the State Bar, which certifies specialization in 11 fields of law, the Lawyer Referral Service of the Bar Association of San Francisco, and the National Board of Trial Advocacy, which certifies specialization in 4 areas of the law. And Deborah and Linda, are you there?
We are. This is Linda.
This is wonderful. Good.
And this is Deborah, yes.
And Deborah, they are with us by telephone. John is with us here in the station at KLW. John, let me throw this one to you.
Sure.
What is elder financial abuse? Briefly,
Sure.
What is it?
Elder financial abuse, well, many of us might think of elder abuse, and at first we think about physical abuse, but financial abuse is any wrongful taking of assets from an elder adult. And in California, we think of an elder adult as being somebody who's over 65 years of age. And wrongful can be any kind of unlawful taking of property, whether it's through fraud or undue influence, or otherwise maybe a breach of fiduciary duty that a trustee owes an elder beneficiary of a trust. And importantly, it's not a taking that was lawful, whether through a lawful contract or maybe a gift that was otherwise lawful. But again, something that is an unlawful or wrong taking of property.
Linda, why is elder abuse so common?
Well, I think one of the reasons our elders are often isolated. They're lonely. They don't have family members that are there with them. Often, I think elders are that generation where they don't want to ask for help. They've always been independent, and they are afraid to lose their independence. Thirdly, if they are taken advantage of, then they're terribly embarrassed. They don't want to admit that they were actually somebody took something from them without them knowing about it, and they feel foolish, and they're afraid to admit that. So they're easy targets. They tend to be more trusting, I think, than other people. And a lot of it has to do, we no longer have the neighborhoods or the communities that we had even 20 years ago. And so that lends elders to be more isolated than most other people.
What do you, the three of you, believe should people do to try to protect themselves? In other words, to have either a team with whom they can rely on, if there is such a thing as a team, something to try to isolate, well, I don't know that that's quite the right word, but to insulate them from elder abuse. What would you, John, what would you suggest? What should people be thinking about?
Sure. Well, you said the word isolate, and I think about the social isolation that a lot of elder adults face at the end of life. Maybe it's because they've had a spouse or loved one that passed away. As it was mentioned, their family members are not as close, communities are not as close. So what can they do? They can cultivate relationships with their trusted team of advisor, be it medical, legal, financial, tax, banking professionals, to stay close with them, to review their plan over a period of time, to address changes in life circumstances with them, because then these professionals may have training in being able to identify potential abuse, and they might be the first responders, if you will, to be able to say, hey, there's been a change in the underlying asset situation, there's been a change in the health situation, there's been a change in the relationship situation, and perhaps we need to draw some attention on that and take some action, and thereby prevent financial abuse from occurring.
Deborah, have you found in your practice that a high percentage of elder financial abuse is really something that relatives are responsible for?
A significant amount, very unfortunately, of the financial elder abuse we have seen is perpetrated by family members. It could be family members. It could be a longtime trusted caregiver. Right. It's a combination, but often it is family. I go back to what John said, and it is important if you do put your estate plan in order or put a plan in order to have this team as a support system there, it's important to protect yourself. You need to look at that plan and review it from time to time. Are the people you've named in those documents still the right people? Did you name a daughter many years ago and that daughter has kind of developed a relationship with somebody who maybe isn't quite as trustworthy as relationships she had many years ago? Do something about it. Change those documents.
In terms of the team you're talking about, the bank officers, physicians, attorneys, maybe your relative or relatives, what concerns me, at least with the professionals, whether it's bank officers, physicians, or attorneys, or others who may be, let's say, financial advisors, everybody is so incredibly busy in our life today, the modern life, that can we really rely on our so-called team members to observe if something strange is going on?
Well, no plan is absolutely foolproof. You're right. And I had an example of that with a client that unfortunately had a call. And this gets back to why elder abuse can be very common. You know, being on a fixed income, being retired. He had this phone call that came in saying, hey, you should buy this website. It'll provide you with a constant stream of advertising income. He went to his bank, said, I'm going to transfer $30,000 to this outfit in a different state. The banker identified the potential elder abuse, said, don't do it. He came back, went to a different branch, and persisted in transferring the money to this abuser. So it's not something that's foolproof. But I do think that coming in regularly, having relationships with your advisors, and then they see a decline, they see a change, and maybe they know, they're aware of your other advisors because they've met, they've talked to each other, they can then they're more likely to be able to prevent that sort of thing from happening.
How often, Linda and Deborah, how often are you seeing in your respective practices in your law firm where the caregiver has taken advantage of the client, let's say a long-time trusted caregiver? How often have you seen that happen?
So this is Linda, and I do see it quite often. Actually, I don't see it as often as I see family members it's kind of interesting, family members taking advantage of the elder. But certainly a caregiver is in a position where the elder might feel she needs or he needs this caregiver, and if they're not nice to the caregiver may not, the meals won't be served as quickly, and the clothes won't be as clean, and it's not pleasant to be with this person 24/7 any longer. So the caregiver is in a very easy position to take advantage of an elder, the caregiver might bring his or her own children into the household to actually live with the elder free of rent, and it's way too easy. That's why it's important. I agree with John and Deborah. We need a community, and I disagree with you, Chuck. I think yes, we're all busy, but I think the community has an obligation to step up. And there are mandated reporters. The bank officer that John referred to, the priest or the minister, or the rabbi, all of these people are mandated reporters. Or doctors, they feel that there's some sort of an abuse situation, they must report this to the authorities.
Well, that's a good point. What about neighbors? We're all so busy in our own lives. And our own lives of spinning, I think, today. What about our neighbors? How much should an elder person want to keep a good communication relationship with his or her or their neighbors? Or do you feel that's important, that neighbors would be a part of the team?
John, do you want to start, and then I'll...
Sure. I think that's extremely important. And as neighbors, unlike family members that may be in a different region or state, neighbors are in a unique situation to be able to see the telltale signs of abuse. Maybe there's a caregiver that suddenly started driving the elder's car, that suddenly has jewelry that they didn't have before, that is spending money. Maybe they're seeing a lack of food or money that the elder has. Maybe they're seeing other signs of decline or social isolation. Those sorts of things could be signs of a greater problem, of actual abuse occurring. Then if they know friends and family members of this elder adult, they can perhaps contact them. If they don't have the contact information or don't know what to do, they could contact Adult Protective Services, which would have the resources to then be able to have a more thorough investigation and then potentially to have what's called a conservatorship. And maybe even the public guardian would do that to take action to protect this elder adult and prevent further abuse from occurring.
Throughout California, it's my understanding that every county has, as part of the county government, an Adult Protective Services office. Essentially, maybe many of us don't know what that's all about. Linda or Deborah, would you like to tell us what is Adult Protective Services and what recommendation do you have, as John has talked about this, that someone would want to contact Adult Protective Services if they felt something was going wrong with their next-door neighbor, etc.?
Mm-hmm. This is Linda, and I'll comment about that. Adult Protective Services, they have, at least in Santa Clara County, they have an obligation to follow up on any report. If anyone, let's say a neighbor, feels that there's something suspicious going on with an elderly person, that report to Adult Protective Services is confidential. They will never, Adult Protective Services, or APS as we call them, would never disclose the name of the person who made that report. And Adult Protective Services will literally go and knock on the door and find out, how are you? And they will, many times we can make an evaluation just by looking at someone in the front door. Do they look clean? What kind of smells are coming out of the house? Looking in the front door, is there a hoarding situation going on? And so APS is, I think, in a unique position to be the first line of defense to go and at least observe and then hopefully look to see who are this elder's closest relatives, closest friends, and I'll follow up on that.
In that you deal, Linda, with Adult Protective Services in Santa Clara County. What are we talking about in terms of what the age that Adult Protective Services might want to look into something? Does the potential consumer have to be a certain age, let's say 60 or over, or 65 or 55, or what?
Yes, I think John mentioned that to an elder, even though we don't want to admit it, but an elder is age 65.
Or a dependent adult.
And so this, and there are so many people who don't consider themselves as an elder, but legally, age 65 means you're an elder.
And I think, Deborah, you said something. I heard you say something, but we didn't get it. What was that?
Oh, I'm so sorry. It could be, so an elder would be age 65 or older, and APS also investigates dependent adult potential abuse.
Yeah. And when you say dependent adult, would you define that a little bit for us?
Sure. So somebody over age 18, because of a mental or physical disability, is unable to protect him or herself.
Yeah.
Can't advocate. He or she can't advocate for him or herself.
Yeah. Okay. That's very helpful. What do we do in terms of prevention? Before we go there, let me ask you this. Presumably, for a good percentage of elder persons, they have prepared a will, maybe they have a trust, maybe they have some other kinds of documents, and maybe they've kept them in their home. And if that person is now, by him or herself, living alone, if married, the other spouse has passed away, what recommendation do you have, John, for someone who has maintained his or her estate planning documents in the house itself, and maybe has the help of a caregiver? What would you recommend, if anything?
Absolutely. Well, as you were describing that, I'm picturing this caregiver in the home with this elder adult having access potentially to those original estate planning documents which are being kept there. Perhaps an unscrupulous person could gain access and doctor those documents, change them, destroy them. And actually in California, if we can't find original estate planning documents or they've been destroyed, there's a presumption that the person intended actually to revoke those documents. I also think about the situation you mentioned where this is a person perhaps who's lost their spouse or they're alone. And that's a situation where family members, neighbors, and others should perhaps be more aware that there could be a potential caregiver abuse situation, so just being mindful of it.
Yeah. Let me do this. Let me interrupt all three of you for a moment. This is your legal rights. I'm going to let you know, if you tuned in a little bit late, we're doing a program on estate planning focusing on the prevention of and how to protect elders from elder financial abuse. My guests are specialists in estate planning, trust, and probate law, certified by the California Board of Legal Specialization. Deborah Radin. Am I pronouncing your last name correctly, Deborah?
Just right, yeah.
Okay, Deborah Radin, Linda Kramer, and John Martin. And I want to let all of you know that by the way, we're doing this program live on Wednesday, July 19th. And for those of you who are listening to the live program, I will be giving you our toll-free number in just a few minutes, and you can call in and talk with my guests. But I'd like all of you to know, whether you listen to the live program or perhaps get it delayed, maybe a week delayed, we are doing our monthly Call a Lawyer Night next week, which is Wednesday, July 26th. This is when, if you're not familiar with this is when you can speak with attorneys off the air who will be on. I have several attorneys here at KLW, and you can speak with them off the air, no obligation on your part whatsoever. This is a public service these attorneys are performing. We've been doing this for many, many, many years in conjunction with the San Mateo County Bar and the San Francisco County Bar. 1-800-525-9917. If you want to, whether you're listening to the live program or not, we will be doing Call a Lawyer. You're welcome to call in on Wednesday, July 26th, between 7 and 8 p.m. at 1-800-525-9917. Now, I think I cut off either you, Linda, or Deborah. You were about to speak, but go ahead.
Sure, this is Deborah. I was going to go back to your point and John's point about neighbors and friends and how vital that role is as a friend or as a neighbor in prevention of elder abuse. So one recent example, that a situation going on right now, I had a neighbor, it was a long time friend who also was a neighbor, call me and say, I'm really worried about my dear friend and who's a client of mine. As the attorney, I am not a mandated reporter. In fact, I'm not allowed to call APS on behalf of my client unless she wants me to do so.
I see.
So the neighbor was not sure what to do. What she did was actually wonderful. She wrote out a declaration of every single instance of concern to her, and she did bring that to the DA, and they are in the process of
the DA, the district attorney.
The district attorney,
yeah.
Yes.
Go ahead.
So she could have gone to Adult Protective Services. She went to the local police department, who then got her to the DA. So that's the connection. And they used that as the very strong starting point for investigating, and the DA has been able to go in and is in the process of locking this woman's accounts and really get a sense of what's going on. So they're not taking away her rights, but she really does need assistance in this case.
Well, that's good to know. Good to know. One of the things I think you mentioned a few minutes ago about the hesitancy or the actual not wanting to show weakness and not asking for help. I think this is terribly important because my experience has been, both in my profession as a deputy district attorney and attorney, that older persons can be very independent. They may not want to communicate certain things even with their own kids at the certain age of the parent. What thoughts do you have about trying to encourage people who may be possible victims or actual victims of financial elder abuse, what do you want to say to them to try to help them realize that asking for help is not a weakness?
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
This is Deborah again. It's not. I actually turn that, and it's actually a sign of strength and control. You are maintaining control if you can, again, gather that team around you and ask for help. These are people who are trained, who are dear friends. You would have done the same for them, I would guess, and it's the opposite of weakness. It's a show of strength and control.
All right. Now, we have people are getting calls. I know in my experience as a deputy district attorney for San Mateo County, I remember one elderly woman, a widow who lived in Hillsborough. She owned her home outright, and one day, this goes back a few years ago, one day she gets this call from a fellow who identifies himself as the attorney for the Canadian lottery. And he told her that she had won $500,000. But because they couldn't send her the check right then because she had to pay the taxes first, and the taxes were $100,000. She did, to make a long story very short, because I don't want to take too much time on this, she had 2 credit cards that totaled up actually more than $100,000. And she sent, whether it was credit card checks or whatever, she sent the money to Canada. Well, that was a total scam. And one of the reason I bring this up is that I have experienced in my capacity as a deputy DA that some older persons get very enthusiastic about the lottery, about this, that, and the other, in that kind of situation where you may get a call from someone saying you've won $500,000 or whatever it may be, but you've got to initially send some money to this. I remember there was one elderly man who got a call saying that he had won $250,000 on this particular lottery, but before they would send him any money, he had to send, I think it was about $5,000 to some address in Ecuador because of the hurricane problem there. I mean, this is all scam stuff.
Right.
What do you recommend, John, to people who are getting solicited like this?
Well, if it's too good to be true, it probably is.
Well, I agree with that.
We've all heard that.
Yeah.
You know, talking to your advisors about it before you make a major financial decision, right? Even if you believe it is a legitimate business opportunity, talk to your tax advisor, talk to your lawyer, talk to your friends, talk to your family members, ask them for advice. Tell them if they think it's also a good business opportunity. If you believe you won the lottery, well, just keep in mind it's probably unlikely that you'd get a phone call telling you to transfer funds over the phone in that way. Again, coming back to the fact that a lot of elder adults may be unsophisticated, there can be some shame around that.
Yeah.
I think back to Deborah's point,
good point.
That you can be forward. It's a sense of strength that you can get by talking to your advisors, by coming forward and talking to them.
Deborah and Linda, what further thoughts do you have on that?
Well, this is Linda, and my additional comment is that I totally agree with John. If it's too good to be true, it typically is. But anybody, whether you're an elder or an 18-year-old, you should not believe something that sounds implausible. And I can, all three of us, we have lots and lots of war stories about telephone solicitations and people literally falling in love over the telephone and promising forever they will come visit and they will send gifts and they would love you forever, or they're a person of God, whatever conversation they can create to engage an elderly person on the phone. And unfortunately, so many elderly people believe this, and they don't like to think that they can be so easily spoofed. And I just think that they are very vulnerable often, and they can be spoofed, especially if they believe that they are so strong and they can never be bamboozled. That, I think, makes someone even more vulnerable. you need to be a little paranoid in this world, unfortunately.
Unfortunately, you're right. I think I think we need to be more paranoid, frankly, in our modern life as it's developing. One of the things that concerns me is that if some elder person or persons have caregivers, and they've had for a while, and start to let the caregiver use their credit cards, use the elder's credit card, what recommendations or what warnings do you have about that?
This is Deborah. It's really important. Somebody needs to maintain some control. So if you do, you love your children, you don't want to be a burden to them, so you have a caregiver, it's okay to introduce those children to the caregiver. Let them have a relationship also. Let your children perhaps be able to see what's going on online, so they can monitor. Or your bank officer may be somebody who would say, wait a second, these are not appropriate expenditures. Or groceries, the expenditures for groceries have suddenly tripled in a month. Something's not right here.
Mm-hmm. I know there was before we went on the air, there was a story that an actual situation that one of you, either you or Linda or Deborah, said about one of the caregivers and her client, the elder person. When they would go out, they would frequently go to a jewelry store. Talk about that briefly, if you would.
Sure. One of my clients, every afternoon, she took a walk around the neighborhood and with a caregiver, and one of the stops they always made was to a jewelry store because my client really just enjoyed looking at jewelry. It was just window shopping. After a while, apparently, the client started buying the jewelry, and the jeweler got back to me and called and said, this doesn't seem right. This client has never purchased jewelry before. All of a sudden, she's buying some pretty expensive pieces of jewelry. It doesn't seem right.
Let me stop you, Linda, at this point. We've come to the end of the statewide version. We'll come back to that in just a moment. All right, everybody, this is Your Legal Rights. I want to give you, and we'll get back to Linda to finish that story, but for all of you to let you know, the first half hour is the statewide version of the program. We record it. KLW sends it out to a number of stations in California, which will air the half hour next week. And so let me give you the toll-free number in case you'd like to call in and speak with my guests. A question, a comment, a concern that you might have. It's 866-798-8255, 866-798-8255. Please call. Don't wait until the end of the next half hour because then we'll be gone. Support for KLW is provided by the Bar Association of San Francisco. If you have a legal problem, you may need to talk to a lawyer. The San Francisco Bar Association's Lawyer Referral Service can arrange an appointment for you to meet with an attorney experienced in the area of law related to your situation in both San Francisco and Marin County. Pardon me. For a referral to a lawyer or the Bay Area Mediation Services Program of the San Francisco Bar Association, call 415-989-1616, 415-989-1616. If you're in San Mateo County, the San Mateo County Bar Association also has a lawyer referral service. That's 650-369-4149, 650-369-4149. The whole point of this, everyone, is that most counties in California have bar associations and lawyer referral services. If you have a problem, you can call your own, tell them what the problem is. They'll find an attorney who's experienced in the area that you're having the problem with. They'll set you up for a half-an-hour consultation. And with minor exception throughout the state of California, for a half-an-hour consultation, you'll pay somewhere between $25 to $35. Now, that's a small investment for that kind of legal services. I hope you don't need it, but it's available to you should you want it. Additional funding for Your Legal Rights is made possible by the Family Law Section of the State Bar of California, the Trust and Estate Section of the State Bar, the Labor and Employment Law Section of the State Bar, the California Applicants Attorneys Association, and the San Mateo County Bar Association. So for those of you who may have tuned in a little bit late, again, let me tell you who my guests are. They are certified specialists by the California Board of Legal Specialization in the area of estate planning, trust, and probate law, Linda Kramer and Deborah Radin. Their office is in Los Altos, California, and John Martin, whose office is in Menlo Park. And so please, if you have a question, a comment, a concern, we're doing this program live on Wednesday, July 19th. I want you to take advantage of the fact that my guests are available to you. This is a public service on their part. The whole point of your legal rights is to educate you and give you an opportunity, should you have a problem, to get some direction from my clients. Under the State Bar of California, my clients are not permitted to give specific legal advice on the air, but what we can do is give you some direction. So take advantage of it. And Gordon, welcome to the program.
Well, thanks very much, Chuck. I've been a fan of your program for a long time. And my question isn't particularly germane to tonight's topic, but more of a suggestion for a future show.
Sure, go ahead.
So I'll be brief.
All right.
I'm a physician, and I've had problems with the California Medical Board. It seems to me that the administrative law that covers discipline of doctors and perhaps other licensed professionals is almost a kingdom to itself. I didn't find that I was able to get very much help in terms of making an appeal in my case or getting that much interest even from my expensive attorney, who I really think was trying to make her bones by bringing a settlement to the board rather than really helping me out. So I think I would be very happy to give my contact info to your call screener and maybe for a future date.
I wish you would do that, Gordon. Yeah, please, I'll ask Martin to get that information from you, and thank you for bringing that up. And I'm sorry you didn't have a very good experience.
And how? Thanks.
Well, that's too bad. That's too bad. I'm in favor of consumer protection, whether you may be a physician or you may be someone who's a plumber or you may be someone who is a consumer with some kind of business. I'm a consumer advocate, and I don't like it when people feel that they have been shortchanged. So thank you, Gordon, very much for that.
Thank you, Chuck.
Yeah. And Martin will talk to you in just a minute. We're going to take another call in just a minute. I think, frankly, my experience, everyone, has been, as we discussed before, when there is a problem of an adult, and we're talking now, an elder is 65 years of older, or if you are someone who has a mental or physical disability, or you're someone who has a friend or relative who does, I'm a great believer in starting with the Adult Protective Services Office in your county and getting them involved with something like that. Number one, if that does not work and you feel you've been, let's say, a victim of a theft or fraud or whatever, certainly you would want to call your local police department or the sheriff's office if you're in a county where the sheriff is your law enforcement officer. All right, Steve, welcome to Your Legal Rights.
Hi there. Great program and a very timely topic, especially in this day and age. I have personal experience with this because I had worked with an elderly gentleman, and he was going to dialysis, and I always helped him out and stuff. I helped him do some online banking so he could pay all his bills and stuff. Then he went to the hospital, and when he got home, he was in a wheelchair, and his son started staying with him. And then I saw in the online account that it was going with withdrawals about $1,000 a week.
By the son.
And previously, the guy would take out $100 every couple of weeks. What's my obligation to report this or anything? Because and the kid already started screaming at me because somebody at the building had already called and reported it.
How old was the son?
Son's probably 50s.
50 years old.
Yeah, the gentleman's 90, and he's kind of he's in a wheelchair bound, and so I've seen his account, which was fine before. It's probably gone from 30,000 to 15,000 in the course of 2 or 3 months.
Steve, what has your relationship been with this elderly man? Is it a friendship or some?
Well, yeah, but I was kind of taking care of him, so I was.
I see. So you were.
I live right by him.
You were a caregiver.
But I don't have. Well, in a sense.
Yeah.
But it is my obligation to call the credit union and tell them, because they've got to be able to see this on the account.
My reaction.
Listen, I don't want to get in trouble either.
You're not going to get in trouble. You're not going to get in trouble. Take the answer on the air, Steve, if you would.
Got it. Thank you.
My reaction to this as a deputy district attorney, frankly, when I hear something like this is, I'm not sure, and certainly John and Deborah and Linda can go to this further, but I'm not sure that you have any legal obligation to report this to the police or Adult Protective Services or whoever it might be. I feel there's a moral obligation, a very significant moral obligation, and if it were something that I was involved with someone who I cared about, whether it's a friendship or I've done some stuff for this person, and I see something like this going on, I certainly, even though I would not have in my personal life any kind of legal obligation to report this, I would do it. Linda and Deborah, how would you deal with this as far as Steve is concerned?
Yes, Steve. Chuck, this is Deborah. And Steve, if Steve is assuming responsibility for the care of this gentleman, he actually is a mandated reporter.
Okay.
And he can report it to APS. He should say it's a confidential report.
Yeah.
His name should not be passed on. It's confidential. So he is mandated if he's assuming responsibility for this gentleman's care.
So, Steve, if you have taken on some responsibility of care for the elderly gentleman, as Linda has just stated, you do fall within the category of a mandated reporter. And since you are in San Francisco, I know that because I see where you're calling from. I don't know where the elderly gentleman is, but assuming the elderly gentleman is in San Francisco, certainly please call the San Francisco Adult Protective Services office and inform them of what the situation is. Deborah, did you have anything else?
Yes, I just wanted to add also, if Steve happens to know, if the gentleman, if he knows who the gentleman's attorney is or other people who are involved, it's okay. The attorney may not talk to Steve, but it's okay to share that information with the attorney.
Good. Very, very good point. John, any further comments? Okay.
I agree.
All right. Brian, welcome to Your Legal Rights.
Oh, thank you.
Sure.
So this is more of a trust question than a elder abuse question.
That's fine. Thank you.
Okay, so I am wondering what the prospects are for removing the AB feature from a family trust when it's not helpful, and the surviving trustee is incapacitated, so it's in the control of successor trustees.
So if you would just elaborate a little bit more, Brian, for those of us who may not know exactly what you're talking about, with a few more words, what are you trying to tell us?
Well, so there is a type of trust that was fashionable a decade ago or a decade and a half ago, which on the death of one of the initial trustees turns into two different trusts. Mm-hmm. An A trust and a B trust, and they each have to file tax returns, and it's supposed to be helpful if your estate is large enough to avoid paying some income taxes.
And so your question then is what, or your concern is what?
When that feature is not helpful, is there a way to remove this feature?
Chuck, you can speak to this.
And who is this?
This This is Linda. Let me just make a comment. He's absolutely right that for many couples, this is no longer a necessary feature in a trust. Primarily, this is a huge issue, by the way, which you could devote another show to. But basically, the AB provisions were to save federal estate taxes for the remainder beneficiaries. And for most people now, they don't have an estate that warrants creating a B or a bypass trust when one of the spouses has died. The AB trust is always for a married couple in California. And so now what we're doing is when we have one spouse dying, excuse me, often we will go to court and we will have these trusts reformed in order to eliminate the bypass trust provision. Hopefully, these trusts have already been... By the way, if anyone has a trust written more than even 5 years ago, they need to visit their estate planning attorney to have their trust updated in order to prevent these huge tax issues. But there are ways of dealing with that after the death of one spouse. It's something that Deborah and I deal with daily. So.
John may have comments also, but I'm going to just jump in real fast to say it depends what your classic lawyer answer depends what the document itself says. It depends who's involved in this family. Is the whole family in agreement or not? What is the size of this estate? So it should be. There are solutions, but it should be reviewed more thoroughly.
Certainly by, I presume, an estate planning attorney.
Correct.
Yeah.
I'd like to relate it to the elder abuse discussion.
Go ahead, if you would, John.
Which is that sometimes when a spouse passes away and they're leaving an estate to a surviving spouse, that surviving spouse could remarry in the future.
Yeah.
And if that happens, there's a blended family potentially with stepchildren and children of the prior marriage. One of the unintended consequences of eliminating that bypass trust for just tax reasons is that it could, unfortunately, result in a disinheritance of the children of the previous marriage.
You got to be real careful,
and
obviously.
That could even be the result of elder abuse by the spouse. So you just need to be aware of those situations before you move in and just eliminate a trust.
Let me give this information to all of you in case you're interested, and you might want to jot down this. With this program, it's not unusual that I will give phone numbers or websites, and it's always wise if you feel it would be something that might be helpful to you to have some paper, a pen or pencil, etc., etc. The California Board of Legal Specialization has free pamphlets in 11 fields of law, or if you're looking for a certified specialist in the 11 legal areas that it certifies, the website is www.calbar.ca.gov. Go to the upper left corner of your screen that says Legal Specialist. Click that on. Click on your county, and then you'll see the specialization areas, and you can find an attorney if you want one. Or that same website you can get and request any one or more of the 11 free pamphlets. If you're looking for nationwide, if you're looking for any certified specialist in 4 legal areas certified by the National Board of Trial Advocacy, that website is www.nbtalawyers.org, NBTA, National Board of Trial Advocates, www.nbtalawyers.org. Okay, here's a question that was brought into the studio. Elderly people might want to join the National Village Movement, communities of people pooling resources to assist one another. For example, Ashby Village is a nonprofit that includes East Bay residents. This is something in California, of course. It relies on a pool of volunteers, service providers, and partnerships with social service agencies. If an elder is part of a village, there may be less chance of an abusive situation. What comments do the three of you have with this? I mean, this obviously sounds very good, and hopefully there would be the protection that an elder might want to have. Linda and Deborah, what thoughts do you have about this?
So this is Deborah, and I absolutely agree with whoever brought that question in. Earlier in the program, we were talking about gathering your team and making sure those team members communicate. Sometimes you have to make your own community, and going back to neighbors and what they'll do for each other. We do live in a more disconnected environment these days. We don't know all of our neighbors as I think we used to do a generation or two ago. And making your own community it could be vital in this situation. I could say selfishly, I'm on the board of the board of Avenidas.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Right, which has a village program in Morris, Santa Clara, San Mateo County.
Right.
But I have found in talking to the members of the village program, it works. There are trusted people who will go to the doctor with you, who will just be a second set of ears and eyes, who check in, who have vetted, trusted handymen to come in or tree trimmers to come in. It's a wonderful, I absolutely agree.
How do you find, generally speaking, if someone were to try to find this kind of a village movement, how would you find this? How would you Google this? Linda or Deborah, what would you suggest?
So I have been told, this is Deborah again, if you did call Avenidas, they are very aware of other village movements in other areas, other communities.
Avenidas, spell it for us, will you?
Sure. A, V as in Victor, ENIDAS.
So if someone Googles Avenidas, they'll be able to find out what the phone number may be, what a website may be, etc., and get in touch that way. Is that right?
Correct. That's the best start I have for you.
Oh, no, that's very, very helpful. Again, our toll-free number, and I want to encourage you, if you do have a question, a comment, a concern, please don't wait. Call now. The toll-free number is 866-798-8255, 866-798-8255. The whole point of the toll-free number is that it doesn't cost you anything, so make it work for you. What have we not touched upon that you would like to include? We have about, I guess, somewhere in the neighborhood of not quite 10 minutes left in the full program, and I want to make sure that we cover, if there's anything that we haven't even touched upon, that we cover that before we end the program. Anything, John?
Yes, well, we've talked about putting our team together with professional advisors, but I think it goes without saying that also choosing the right trustees, agents, whether it's financial or healthcare, it goes without saying that you should think very critically about who these people will be, and then also involve them. Tell them that you've thought about them, that you'd like to have them involved with your estate plan. Tell them what your action plan is for making sure that documents will get to them. Also make sure that they'd be able to come into action if you were declining mentally or physically. And then let's say you are a successor trustee or an agent, and you see somebody declining gradually. Don't wait. Step in if you see that sort of thing happening. Don't allow the abuse to continue or to start. If you see some of these telltale signs that we've been talking about, intervene early and often as a successor trustee or an agent in those kinds of situations.
Also, my assistant on the program, Martin McLean, brought me in the website for Village to Village Network. If you'd like to jot this down, it's www.vtvnetwork.org, VTV for Village to Village. So www.vtvnetwork.org. Now, again, the toll-free number is 866-798-8255. Deborah or Linda, anything else that occurs to you at this point?
You know, this is Linda. One thing that occurred to me is a lot of people think they want a short circuit, having to deal with an attorney or having to deal with an accountant, and so they tend to practice law on their own. And one very simple thing is establishing a joint account, having a joint banking account with a child. And the assumption by the elder is that if there's an emergency, this child will be able to access the money and take care of things. Well, the downside of that, and I just dealt with it last week, the downside of that is that account belongs to the surviving joint tenant.
Yeah, of course.
And that means if the elder dies, all of a sudden that $100,000 account belongs to the one child and is probably not going to be divided among the three children. And without a lot of tension in the family, even though the elderly parent says, oh, my kids would never, ever fight. They would never argue with one another. And in this situation, to make matters worse, is this account had automatic deposits from a lot of rental properties. And so after the elder died, money kept on coming into this joint account. and so it really enhanced this one child significantly more than the other kids were getting.
How do you protect yourself from something like this? What would you recommend?
One of the things I would recommend is don't have a joint account. Certainly you can give the child check writing ability. Let him have a power of attorney on that account in order to write checks to pay bills, but not ownership. And a lot of people don't think beyond that. It seems so easy to just put a kid on the account, and it often backfires.
So even though, Linda, if, for example, a person as an elder permits their child to have check writing ability, not to be joint tenants on the account, but check writing ability, that does not give the child ownership of that account. Is that account? Is that what you're telling us?
That's absolutely correct. And once the elderly person dies, that check writing authority stops.
That's well, thank you for that. That's I think very helpful for people who might be thinking about or might have joint accounts with a child or children, etc. We have Marion. Welcome to Your Legal Rights.
Thank you. You mentioned earlier about having a will and having someone in the home able to access that will in some unfortunate situation. What are the alternatives? What are the other options that you can do to protect yourself?
Okay, John, please.
I neglected to complete that
I
thought,
probably cut you off, and I apologize.
But my suggestion is to have a safe deposit box where you keep the documents off-site and then name the successor trustee or executor as a co-depositor on that box. And what that will do is it well, first of all, you'd have to have them physically present when you go to the bank. So that's part of your conversation about how to gain access to these documents if you ever became incapacitated or passed away. And it's also a way for them seamlessly to get in and access those documents. You may forget about setting up that box. Hopefully your agent or trustee doesn't, and they'd be able to access them. Who
would you, besides your trustee or your agent, who else would you let know that you have a safety deposit box where you have put your valuable, whether it's your documents or perhaps jewelry or whatever it might be? Who else would you recommend that you would want to let know about this, should there be a need of someone else being aware that there is a safety deposit box? Right. Should you become incompetent, for example? Yeah, there are several ways to do that, and I think it does have to be balanced against everyone's concern for privacy. Obviously, we don't need, or it's not necessarily desirable to share every detail of our financial lives with children or friends or even professional advisors, but at the very least, you could have a letter maybe that you say, hey, open this in the event of my incapacity or death. And that has some instructions on how to get into this box. Or maybe you do decide there's going to be some limited disclosures that I make to family members or to other professionals where I say, hey, I have this safe deposit box. That doesn't mean you're disclosing all the terms of where your property goes. No. You're just saying where it is. Maybe you provide them with a key. And taking other steps to make sure that there would be a plan. And it's practical stuff. This is not rocket science. If you write this letter, who would you give this to? Well, my thought would be to have a sealed envelope that you could either give directly to this person. You say, open this in the event of my incapacity or death. Or you tell them where you're going to keep that document. I see. So that they'd be able to access it. I see.
And jumping in, this is Deborah. We have notes in files. So your attorney is another good trusted advisor, I would expect. Yeah. Good point. To keep notes. Good point.
And many attorneys are no longer keeping estate planning documents for clients. It's increasingly the case.
Why is that?
Well, attorneys do, and I do this for some clients, on an ongoing basis if I'm continuing to advise them. But many attorneys are concerned about the liability for continuing to store estate planning documents because they have a duty of care over those documents. So for that reason, and also just because of the legacy, you don't necessarily know if the client is still at their same address. What if they've passed away? They could have created new documents, and that can create issues down the line.
All right, we have time for one very brief further question or comment. Marilyn, welcome to the program.
Hi. I wanted to ask, I know this sounds ignorant, but I have a joint checking account with my husband who has dementia, and I would like him to pay half of the rent, and I have never had him pay half of the rent because I don't want to get in any kind of trouble. I always pay it all myself. So do I need a power of attorney, or is it okay to write a check because I'm on a joint account with him, which I opened?
Okay, but all right, you opened this joint account with your husband who has dementia.
Yeah, I have my own account, but I also opened one for him because these accounts are interest-bearing. So. Well,
are you also on the account with his name on it?
Yes, his name is first on that account.
I see.
So we both get interest on each of our accounts that way.
But in terms of the rent that you are paying, you don't make any payments from his account. Is that correct?
No, I always pay the whole rent myself. Because
well, let me briefly get some comments from people, and it may be that you want to seek the advice of an attorney, Marilyn, and I would suggest you might, since you're in San Francisco, you might want to call the lawyer referral service of the San Francisco Bar. Take an answer on the air. We're nearly out of time. Linda or Deborah, what very brief comments do you have for her?
Okay, so this is Linda. I don't know the status of their marriage, but it is California. It is a community property state. It seems like a married couple should share in paying the rent, or the mortgage or whatever it is they're paying for. So my one comment is I don't care what account out of which she takes the money. It's probably money that belongs to the two of them. But again, I don't know the status. Have they been married 1 year? Have they been married 50 years? There are a lot of things going on here.
We have run out of time, and Marilyn, I suggest you do call the lawyer referral service of the San Francisco Bar. I want to thank the three of you very much for joining us on the program. It's been a great pleasure to have you. Linda Kramer and Deborah Radin, specialists in estate planning, trust, and probate law. The Kramer Radin Law Firm in Los Altos, which is in California, if you didn't know that, anybody. And John Martin, specialist in estate planning, trust, and probate law. His office is in Menlo Park. That's also California. They are certified by the California Board of Legal Specialization of the State Bar. Thank you very much for joining us. Next time on Your Legal Rights, the topic is landlord-tenant laws, disputes, issues, and how California law applies when there are landlord-tenant disputes. My guest will be landlord-tenant attorney Jessica Chilek and Sal Timpano. Also, July 26th, that's next week, will be our monthly Call a Lawyer night from 7 to 8 p.m. when you can call in off the air on 1-800-525-9917 to speak with one or more attorneys in several legal areas. Your Legal Rights production staff members are program engineer Joanne Marr and production assistant Mark McClain. This segment of Your Legal Rights has been made possible by the California Board of Legal Specialization of the State Bar and by the National Board of Trial Advocacy, which also funds the public radio satellite transmission of the program for national distribution. Thanks for joining us on Your Legal Rights Public Radio, and I hope you join us next time on your public radio station. I'm Chuck Finney.